Welcome, everyone, to today's The AI Boom is Now About Power, Chips, Jobs, and Trust, April 28th, 2026. For those of you just tuning in, we're starting about 2 minutes early. So we'll just kind of sit here for a little bit, listen to some music, and at the half hour, we'll kick it off. And welcome, everyone, today. Today we'll be talking about the AI boom is now about power, chips, jobs, and trust. My good friend Dapper Achilles, unfortunately, is traveling today, so it's just me. But we'll roll through the headlines and bring you up to date on everything AI and where everything's going. So this week's AI headlines feel less like a technology cycle and more like a stress test of modern society. Over the last 7 days, at least, we've seen AI move into phones, workplaces, classrooms, hospitals, financial systems, military workflows, personal identity. But the human systems around it still feel half built. I think the deeper signal is clear. AI is no longer just becoming more capable, it's becoming more embedded, more expensive, certainly more political, and more difficult to govern. So, what happens when the AI boom stops feeling like innovation and starts feeling like a fight over who gets power, who gets kicked, priced out, who gets replaced, and who gets believed? AI is becoming a real-world stress test of power, control, work, and trust. From CNBC, they're reporting that the AI data center backlash is threatening Pennsylvania's GOP and governments in the 2026 election. And then WBUR is reporting that after the recent moratorium on data centers in Maine, Governor Janet Mills has now vetoed that as well. And it's really showing that data centers are becoming a political issue. And that tells us the AI boom is now landing inside communities, utility grids, and even local elections. Then from Forbes, we have Stanford lecturer explains why AI value gets trapped in chips. And they're arguing that value is concentrating in the compute layer. And this reminds us that people who control the chips may control the pace and economics of AI itself. From Newstack.io, we hear about the disappearing AI middle class, warning us that AI may hollow out the middle layer of knowledge work. It's showing that the workforce risk is not only job loss, but erosion of the roles where people used to learn, grow, and build judgment. And from USA Today, we've got AI-generated influencers are here. Can you tell who's really real? It's asking whether people can still recognize authenticity online, and it really points to the deeper trust crisis underneath all of this. So I think the uncomfortable question for today is not just whether AI is moving fast, it's whether our communities, companies, workers, and institutions are being asked to absorb more change than they can actually process. And who benefits when that confusion becomes the new operating environment? So I want to start there. It's really, are we talking about AI progress, or are we starting to talk about AI power? And today, I just want to break down what's happened this week, what most people are missing, I think, and why founders, investors, executives, and operators should really pay attention to the systems forming underneath the AI layers, because the real story is not just better models. It's who controls the infrastructure, who captures the value, who takes the risk, and who gets left adapting to the fact. From the power place, I mentioned AI is now colliding with energy, communities, and politics. And the AI boom obviously is no longer just a software story. It's becoming energy, land use, and local government. I think the key shift is that AI infrastructure is now really, really visible. Data centers are no longer invisible back-end facilities. They're becoming physical projects that affect towns, grids, emissions, utility rates, even zoning fights and political campaigns. And I think that matters because AI futures may not be decided only by model quality. It's now we're seeing decided by who can secure the power, who can finance infrastructure, and who can win community permissions. Also, who can avoid becoming the symbol of extraction in the local communities. For the last few years, most people experienced AI as software, a chatbot, a writing tool, a coding assistant, or even a productivity shortcut. But now the hidden machinery behind AI is really becoming impossible to ignore. Data centers need land, they need power, they need water. And that obviously affects utility rates, local zoning, emissions, grid capacity, and community trust. And that really changes the whole conversation. So AI is no longer just a technology story. It's now a community story. It's an energy story. It's a political story. And in some places, it's a local backlash story. And I think the companies that win may not only be the ones with the best models, but obviously the ones that can secure energy, build infrastructure, and really earn permission from the communities where this infrastructure lands. So, obviously AI is no longer running in the cloud. It's landing in towns, power grids, and so on. And as this boom becomes more visible, I think when people are starting to see it, they start asking who's really benefiting and who pays the cost. I mentioned CNBC story, the AI data center backlash. Also, Washington Post is talking data centers could surround a tiny Pennsylvania town of Archibald. It really brings this issue down to a human level. With the AI boom landing in small towns where people are asking, what are they gaining? What are they losing? And were they ever really consulted? Seattle Mayor from broadbandbreakfast.com, the Seattle Mayor is considering a data center moratorium, as well as the recent veto we saw. That really signals that local governments may be slowing or even blocking AI infrastructure where community costs feel too high. And this could become a major constraint on AI growth. For futurism.com, just 11 AI data centers could belch more fumes than entire countries. And so it brings up the whole issue around climate, emission side of the power story. And it turns the AI infrastructure from a productivity miracle really into a sustainability trade-off. In Utah, we're seeing the Shark Tank's massive energy data center development from Deseret.com. And this story shows the opposite side of the backlash story, where states and investors are racing to build the energy and data center capacity needed to win this infrastructure race. The next section I want to talk about is chips. And the AI boom's really becoming a compute control war. And I think whoever controls compute controls the pace, the cost, and really the geography of AI deployment. I think that's why we're seeing headlines in the last 7 days around NVIDIA, DeepSeek's recent new model that pushed out, which is, I've seen figures from 75 to 95% cheaper, from Huawei, Intel, even China export controls, CPU shortages, chip equipment stories, compute scarcity. All these really matter and come together. And it's really not about faster processes. I think it's about whether AI value gets trapped inside a small number of hardware suppliers, whether the startups can compete, whether China can route around US constrictions, and whether the next wave of AI becomes more open or even more concentrated. So the chip story really is a power story hiding inside a supply chain story. For a long time, people talked about AI as if the model was the center of value. But the deeper signal now that we're seeing, especially in the last 7 days and the last couple of weeks, is that compute's becoming a control layer underneath the entire AI economy. And really, whoever controls the chips controls who can build, who can scale, who can compete, and who gets priced out. And I think that's why NVIDIA, Huawei, DeepSeek, and all the others that are part of the same story. It's not just about faster hardware, it's about control over the pace and geography of AI itself. And that's where it starts to get really interesting. AI is creating demand for chips, but AI is also helping companies design new chips. So the compute bottleneck may eventually create its own disruption cycle, where today's hardware monopolies become tomorrow's strategic targets. So, with AI getting trapped in the hardware layer, what that means is the real platform war may be happening underneath the software that everyone's watching. Some of the headlines that support that from Forbes: Stanford lecture, as I mentioned, why AI gets valued in chips. That's really supports the chips control argument. DeepSeek from tomshardware.com. DeepSeek launches 1.6 trillion parameter V4 on Huawei chips as US escalates AI theft accusations. So the US government is currently doing a fairly strong push to accuse the Chinese of stealing AI thefts. Next story from Supercar Blondie. AI is making it possible for companies to design and build chips that compete with NVIDIA, and startups are racing to make that happen. So it's interesting that AI is also creating the competition to go against the big players. Then a story out of investing.com, China's warning of a global supply chain disruption as US chip exports bills advance. And that really shows how chip restrictions can ripple throughout the entire global economy. I think the AI race is now tied to export controls and probably retaliation risk and somewhat of the supply chain fragility. From 404 Media, there's a story, the AI compute crunch is here. And that really gives the clearest macro framing. Compute scarcity is not just a tech bottleneck, it's becoming an economic bottleneck. Moving on to jobs. So AI is moving from productivity tool to workforce redesign. And I think the job story is much more complicated than, just AI replaces people. I mean, that's really an easy headline, but I don't think it's really the deeper one. What seems to be happening is that AI is starting to redesign the shape of work itself. It's changing how teams are staffed, how software gets built, how companies measure productivity, and how many people are needed to launch something, and what junior roles are even for. And that's really the much bigger shift. The future of work may not arrive as one massive job loss event. I don't think it will. I think it'll arrive through thousands and thousands of smaller operating decisions. One less analyst here, one AI assisted coding team there, one founder doing the work of 10 people, one enterprise rolling AI tools out to thousands of employees. And we've seen a number of stories of that this week. And one company deciding the middle layer of work can be compressed. So the real question is not just, will AI take jobs? I think a better question is, what kind of work still develops human judgment, skill, trust, and career momentum when AI absorbs more of the execution layer? So, AI really may quietly redesign the org chart, one workflow at a time. And so I think in some ways it could be hollowing out the middle layer where people used to grow, learn, and become valuable. And the company of the future may be much smaller, faster, and more automated, which means human value has to move higher up the judgment stack. Some of the stories around that, Axis.com saying AI can cost more than human workers now. This is a really funny story. So it really complicates the replacement narrative. AI is not automatically cheaper. That means companies have to rethink return on investment, just not headcount. And I think it's a much more mature and useful jobs discussion. I heard a number of stories where people were rehiring junior coders because the AI tools were more expensive. And so we're seeing this sudden flip of actually starting to hire. the newsstack.io had a story around the disappearing AI middle class. I mean, that really supports the human labor market angle. And I think the concern is not only job loss, but the hollowing out of that middle layer. From the UK, we have finance.yahoo.com. NVIDIA deploys OpenAI's Codex across 10,000 employees as Jensen Huang hails the age of AI. So at least they're pushing the tools out across the board. And then we've had from the IndianExpress.com, 75% of Google code is now AI generated. And this is probably one of the strongest job redesign signals. If code generation is becoming normal inside Google, the question becomes what software teams look like next, not whether AI is useful. Another story out of tech in Asia, Salesforce is hiring 1,000 graduates as interns for AI. So while a lot of the stories have popped up about people, downsizing, laying off, and now we're hearing other stories saying, no, we're going to hire more, with Salesforce doing 1,000 graduates. And so AI is not only kind of maybe deleting role, it's also creating new hiring demand around AI skills, implementation, operations, and applied enterprise workflows. From entrepreneur.com, the AI playbook that built an 800 million one-person business. This really shows the extreme productivity edge of the job story. The company of the future may be smaller, more automated, and more leverage-driven, which really changes how we think about employment and entrepreneurship. The fourth area to jump into is around trust. And I think the public's being asked to believe faster than it can process. We've seen so many stories around this. So trust, it feels like the emotional center around what we're talking today. AI is moving into everything at once: medicine, finance, media, education, work, customer service, entertainment, personal identity. But at the same time, people are seeing, AI hallucinations, fake influences. We're seeing AI generated emails to look more human. We're seeing medical backlash. We're seeing enterprise risk. We're seeing warning from AI leaders about economic disruption. I mean, this really creates a belief gap. And I think the technology is asking people to trust it faster than they can emotionally, socially, or even institutionally process it. And I think that's where the adoption is really starting to get fragile. Like, people may use AI because it's useful, but still not fully trust it. And there's been a number of research reports on that. Companies may deploy AI because it looks efficient, but still not know how to govern it. And we've seen many stories where there's been deployments that have failed, either through lack of guardrails or really lack of understanding of what they're doing and what needs to be prepared for AI to actually work. Consumers may see AI generated content everywhere, but become less sure of what is real and authentic. And I think that's why trust may become the biggest bottleneck in AI, not because the technology is weak, but because the human systems around it are really overloaded. Some supporting headlines around that. From the news, after the GPT 5.5 release, Sam Altman even warned AGI could trigger an economic collapse. I mean, that really kind of ramps up the whole emotional tension of the week. Even as AI capabilities accelerate, you've got these leading figures warning about systemic consequences. Another story out of Denmark, 70% of enterprise AI is uncontrolled, driving hidden risk, cost, and slower AI. So now we're seeing reporting out of enterprise governance being a real issue. Companies may be adopting AI faster than they control it, measure it, or even secure it. I mean, from fortune.com, story titled, AI is frying our brains. Here's what leaders need to do about it. This obviously supports the human belief layer. I mean, the concern is not just whether AI works, but what constant AI use does to human cognition, judgment, and leadership. Out of USA Today, we've got AI generated influencers here. Can you tell how they're real? I mean, that hits the identity and reality layer when people cannot easily tell who is real. Trust moves from a technical issue to a cultural issue. From futurism.com again, a new browser plugin is adding typos to your AI generated emails to make them look real. This is a perfect trust eroding signal. I mean, AI content is not only becoming more polished, it's now being intentionally made to look more human, which makes authenticity in many ways harder to detect. In the last, I think it was 2 months ago, state of Utah allowed AI doctor experiment to renew prescriptions. Now a story coming up in state news in Utah, the Utah Medical Board is calling for an immediate suspension of the state's AI doctor experiment. So again, trust issue becoming high stakes in healthcare, obviously extremely important. The question is not whether AI is impressive, it's whether people trust it with life impacting decisions. So I think what we're saying in today's podcast is the AI boom has really entered its real world phase. It's no longer about better models. It's no longer about faster tools. It's now about whether we have enough power, who controls the chips, what happens to jobs, and whether people still trust what they see, read, hear, and use. So let me kind of roll down, I think, 5 things that mainly happened this week. The first thing is, OpenAI appears to be moving deeper into consumer hardware. We saw a couple of reports of an AI phone designed to challenge the app-based smartphone model, Apple, and push AI agents closer to the center of daily life. The second major thing that happened this week was Microsoft and OpenAI's relationship is changing. Microsoft reportedly losing exclusive access to OpenAI's models and tools, which really signals that the AI platform wars are becoming more open, hopefully more competitive, and certainly more complicated. The third area was AI agents are moving from hype into enterprise operations, with major companies expecting agents to become part of daily workflows, while new warnings are emerging around cost, uncontrolled deployment, cybersecurity, lots of reports on that, and then hidden ROI problems. The fourth major thing that happened this week was AI's putting pressure on education and software business models, with Chegg's collapse being framed as a warning sign for any company whose value can be compressed into an AI answer box. And the fifth major area is AI is becoming a governance and trust issue, from Google employees objecting to classified Pentagon AI work to concerns about AI-generated health content, chatbot addiction, deepfakes, agentic trading, AI systems operating in sensitive public and financial infrastructures. And those are the 5 major parts of what happened this week. So at first glance, these kind of may look scattered, but they're really not. I think together they show that AI is shifting from the model race into a control race. The first phase of AI was about capability, who had the best chatbot, who had the best model, who could generate the best text, the code, images, and video. But this next phase that we're now in, the battle's moving into chips, phones, operating systems, enterprise workflows, data centers, governance rules, identity systems, agent permissions, pricing models, and institutional trust. And that really means AI is no longer sitting on top of the economy as a useful tool. It's starting to move inside and become the operating layer of the economy itself. And once that happens, the big questions change. It's really no longer, can AI do this? It really becomes, who owns the rails AI depends on, who sets those rules, who's responsible, and what happens when those systems fail, who's liable. I think, as I look at the news rolling across, what's being most missed in the coverage is that AI's adoption is not failing because the tools are weak. It's failing because the organizational systems around them are weak. I mean, that's really the hidden pattern in the last 7 days. Enterprises are buying AI agents before they fully understand the workflows, permissions, costs, security risks, and the human handoffs required to make those agents useful. Consumers are being pushed towards AI assistance before society's even figured out trust, identity, privacy, or emotional dependency. And we've got governments experimenting with AI before public institutions have the governance maturity to manage the consequences of those. So there's some second order implications from all of that. AI is exposing the weakness of every system it enters. If your data is messy, AI makes that visible. If your governance is weak, AI amplifies the risk. If your business model depends on information scarcity, AI compresses it. If your workforce strategy is unclear, then AI turns that uncertainty into fear. The strategic consequence of all this is that the winners will not just be the companies with the best AI tools. I believe the winners will be the ones with the best operating discipline around AI. Now, a contrarian take for this week is that the AI winners won't be the companies shouting the loudest about agents. I think it may be the companies that slow down just enough to build the trust layer properly. Right now, the market is rewarding speed. Ship the agent, Add the co-pilot, God forbid, no. Automate the workflow. Put AI into the phone. Put AI more into your car. Put AI more into finance. Put AI into healthcare. Put AI into government. But the more powerful AI becomes, the more valuable restraint becomes. And I know that might sound counterintuitive, but I believe it really matters, because in the next phase that I think we need to get to, the real competitive advantage may not be we use AI everywhere. It may be we know exactly where AI should act, where humans must stay accountable, and where automation creates more risk than value. And I think that's a very different kind of AI leadership. And frankly, it may be the one the market's not really priced in yet. Kind of the crazy thing that happened in the last 7 days, where bosses are reportedly spending more money on AI agents than it would cost just to pay human workers. It's not just a funny headline. In many ways, it's a signal. It shows how powerful the AI narrative has become, because some companies are no longer comparing AI against actual business outcomes. They're comparing it against the dream of a future workforce that is cheaper, faster, always available, and easier to control. But that dream can become very expensive if the agent itself needs oversight, integration, debugging, security controls, escalation paths, and the human cleanup when things go wrong, which is what we're seeing. So, it's not that companies are experimenting with AI agents. They really should be. The crazy thing this week has been that, some are buying the fantasy of labor replacement before doing the math on operational reality. And that may be one of the biggest AI lessons of this week. Automation is not automatically efficient. Sometimes it's just complexity wearing a productivity costume. And I think that's the biggest shift going on it. Let's roll through some of the headlines that kind of popped up in the major sections on power with agentic AI, geopolitics, and governance this week. One of the things that popped up, which was kind of interesting, is that over 580 plus Google employees, including DeepMind researchers, are urging the CEO of Google to refuse a classified Pentagon AI deal. I think what matters here is not only the contract itself, but the internal resistance from employees who understand the technology and fear how it may be used. I mean, this really shows how AI governance is not only happening in the Congress or parliaments or court or boardrooms, it's also happening inside companies, where workers are beginning to challenge whether their labor should be used to expand military AI power. And it's interesting that AI labor resistance is becoming a real governance force. Internal company ethics may become as important as external regulation. I think what may happen next is we can expect more employee-led pressure campaigns inside major AI labs as defense, intelligence, and classified government use cases expand. And so I think that's an interesting shift. So if employees know a system could be used in war, do they have the responsibility to resist its deployment? I mean, many say yes. Another story from DefenseOne.com, Pentagon is adding Google's latest model to their GenAI.mil as usage internally soars. It's becoming embedded into defense systems. That's increasing usage, and it's really becoming operationally sticky in the whole military complex. I think the human impact is really serious, because military decisions, public communication, intelligent workflows, and battlefield planning may increasingly depend on systems most citizens will never see. And this institutionalization of AI power inside national defense, I think, is a really obviously powerful trend, but it's somewhat worrying. And so defense adoption is becoming operational, not just theoretical anymore. And this military AI stack's being built in real time. So then the question pops up, should commercial AI companies have different rules when their models are used by the military? Another report coming out of the street, Defense Department users of Anthropic Claude stayed the course as rift peaked. Well, the rift between Anthropic and the federal government here in the US. Apparently, they just kept on using the tool and kept moving it forward. As they say, once AI enters the workflow, it's really hard to pull back. And also, government dependency may become the real AI lock-in. The question pops up from that: should public agencies disclose when and where they rely on commercial AI systems? I think we certainly should have more disclosure around that. The US Army is using AI to sharpen their combat edge. From Army.mil, the 1st Armored Division's use of AI reflects how quickly artificial intelligence is entering direct military readiness and combat optimization. This is not AI as a productivity assistant. This is AI as a force multiplier in environments where speed, prediction, and tactical advantage can determine life or death. The human impact obviously is profound because soldiers, civilians, adversaries are obviously all affected by decisions accelerated through AI-supported systems. The battlefield is now becoming more automated, more data-driven, and potentially harder to slow down. I think we can expect more military units to adopt AI for planning, logistics, targeting support, communications, and training. And so speed is becoming a military AI advantage. So when AI accelerates combat decisions, does it make war safer or does it make it easier to start? I think that's a question that's going to start popping up in a big way. Another story, Army Public Affairs is now being trained on AI. It showed the story from Army.mil again. Army AI is moving to military public affairs where communication, perception, and narrative control matter deeply. I think this matters because power is not only exercised through weapons and logistics, it's also exercised through messaging, through legitimacy, through public interpretation. And the human impact is that citizens may increasingly encounter military narratives shaped, accelerated, or assisted by AI systems. And so in the age of synthetic media, public affairs becomes part of the AI trust battlefield. I think we can expect AI to become more common in government communications, certainly military information operations and crisis messaging. So the narrative is becoming an AI-assisted domain, and public affairs is now part of the AI battlefield. Again, the question raises, should military communications disclose when AI helps shape the message? I certainly feel that's true. Another story from the military side, US Marines just tested a self-driving artillery truck that keeps fighting even when GPS goes dark. So we're seeing GPS-denied operations is now a strategic capability, and battlefield robotics may influence civilian autonomy systems in many ways. So autonomy is being built for the fog of war in many ways. But the question comes back, how much autonomy should military machines have when communications fail? Should the AI take over and then shorten the kill cycle? Certainly in real world examples coming out of the conversation.com, Ukraine's killer robots are now showing how war is changing. Ukraine's use of robotic and autonomous systems is showing how quickly war adapts when survival, scarcity, and innovation collide. The battlefield is becoming a test bed for technologies that would take far longer to normalize in peacetime. And I think the human impact is really uncomfortable because robots can reduce danger for one side while increasing speed, distance, and ambiguity in killing. And this is where military necessity becomes a pathway for global technology adoption. This combat innovation really is spreading beyond its original context. And it's obvious that ethical frameworks are lagging behind battlefield reality. What can we expect? Certainly, Ukraine and other conflict zones are going to continue to shape the global future of autonomous defense technologies. And in many ways, robots are entering the most dangerous jobs first, while the battlefield's rewriting the rules of this autonomy. If robots reduce soldier casualties but make killing easier, is that really progress? Another story popping through, AI nationalization enters the political imagination from The Atlantic. What happens if the federal government were to seize AI companies? Interesting opinion piece. The story raises the prospect of government seizure or control of AI companies. We kind of saw maybe possibly that with the issue around Anthropic and the Defense Department. So, moving AI from private enterprise into national power is becoming part of the debate. Even if it's just hypothetical, the framing matters because it shows that AI companies are now viewed as strategic assets similar to energy, defense, telecommunications, and financial infrastructure. And the human impact is that citizens could see private AI tools become instruments of state policy. This really changes the relationship between innovation, liberty, national security, and corporate power in many ways. I mean, if AI firms are being framed as strategic national assets, then that really changes the whole debate and the approach to policy. The line between private platform and public power is really narrowing. And I think you can expect the debate more around emergency powers, AI sovereignty, defense production authority, even national security claims over AI infrastructure. And I think AI companies obviously are now becoming too strategic to ignore by nation states. The national security debate may be about model ownership. Private AI power is starting to look like public infrastructure. So should any government have the right to take control of AI companies in the name of national security? That could be one of the most significant questions coming up. Another interesting story that popped through from Forbes: the US Cyber Agency actually lacks advanced AI hacking tools. This kind of blew my mind. The story suggests that the US Cyber Agency may not have access to the advanced AI hacking tools needed to understand or counter emerging threats. Obviously, this matters because defenders cannot govern or protect against systems they can't test at the same level as the attackers. I mean, the impact is that hospitals, utilities, local governments, schools, small businesses may be exposed if public cybersecurity institutions fall behind. You know, AI security is becoming a public safety issue, not just an IT issue. And, you know, it's clear that defense AI capability must keep pace with, offensive tools. And so I expect agencies to push for either greater funding, private sector partnerships, or both, and obviously controlled access to advanced cyber tools. We saw that with Anthropic Mythos being not released and partially released to some banks to test out because it could break everything in sight. One thing we don't want is our defenders being underpowered. And, you know, the AI cyber defense is really becoming a public safety infrastructure. So, you know, the question is, should governments have access to the same AI cyber tools as elite private security firms? I think they should have better access. There has been some stories popping up. The IB Times, some lawmakers are worrying about AI could expand government's ability to spy on citizens without warrant. A number of lawmakers are raising concerns that AI may expand the government's ability to monitor systems without traditional warrant protections. Obviously, this really matters because AI can analyze enormous volumes of data, connect patterns, infer behavior in ways humans can't do at scale. I mean, the human impact is really direct. Privacy may erode through not one dramatic law, but through many invisible systems quietly linking data together. And AI turns surveillance from a manual act into a really automated capability. And it allows surveillance to be scalable. So the privacy debate is now becoming an AI debate. The danger is not one camera, it's really every data set talking to every other data set. So should AI generated inferences require the same legal protection as direct surveillance? I think that horse has already left the barn on that one. Another story popping up out of vtdigger.org. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are learning to love AI. Apparently, the story points to a growing AI adoption among lawmakers, showing that political institutions are beginning to use the same tools they are trying to regulate. That matters because AI can help with research, obviously, drafting, constituent communications, policy workflows. But the impact's, I think, more complicated. If elected officials become dependent on AI-generated analysis, then the voters may not know how much of political judgment is being shaped by machines versus humans. I mean, the people writing the rules may also be quietly changed by the tools themselves. And we've seen that with chatbots, with people interacting with chatbots and getting changed and consequences from that. So I think it's weird that lawmakers are using AI while also regulating it at the same time. And I think we need far more transparency around AI-assisted policymaking than we've had before. What I do expect is more AI use inside legislative offices, followed by debates over disclosure, bias that we've seen popping up, lobbying influence, and policy authorship, really, and the transparency around all of that. It's unfortunate that government adoption is moving faster than government understanding. But I believe, the question is, should lawmakers disclose when AI helps drafting legislation or policy language? Absolutely. And we've actually seen where people have tried to push policy that was AI generated and it was full of mistakes and they got slammed for it. Meanwhile, the whole battle between in the US federal control of AI versus state control of AI and regulatory stuff continues to ping pong back and forth. Story from Brandon.com. Florida lawmakers are returning to tackle AI regulation amidst pressure from DeSantis, the governor. Florida lawmakers are returning. It matters because the US is obviously developing a patchwork of state-level AI laws before federal standards get fully baked in. The impact obviously is obvious. Consumers, workers, students, and businesses basically could have different protections depending on where they live. AI rights and responsibilities could be geographically uneven and completely fragmented. I think the fragmentation is just going to increase because the battle between the states and the feds here are just going to continue. And states are really filling the federal vacuum. And so your AI rights might depend on your zip code. Should AI right protections be national, or should the states experiment with different rules? It seems like we're doing both at the same time here in the US. Other parts of the world, I think, having a much more focused and a better approach. So anyone make comments. If you're in Europe, if you're in Southeast Asia, if you're in Australia or Asia Pacific, let me know, because it seems like everything's going crazy here. Another story, Colorado is making a major step towards rewriting its AI law as its effective date approach. So for Colorado, the lawmakers are trying to balance consumer protection, business feasibility, bias controls, and innovation pressure. So the impact here is that rushed or poorly designed regulation can either fail to protect people or create confusion that weakens compliance. And this is a messy middle phase that we're currently in here, where AI governance is trying to move from principle to operational reality. And so we're seeing a big rewrite phase occurring across the board here, where good intentions are really meeting operational impacts. And it's obviously, governance is easy to announce and hard to implement. And I think, the question pops up, well, is it better to pass imperfect AI laws early, or wait until the risks are clearer, or just cycle both through? Another part about the lawsuits popping up. The United States has joined XAI fight against the Colorado AI bias law. Again, another sign of the fragmentation. The US government is joining XAI's fight, where it signals a growing federal to state conflict over who has the authority to regulate AI. And this matters because bias laws often sit at the intersection of consumer protection, civil rights, innovation policy, and corporate liability. The impact for the rest of us is that people affected by AI decisions in hiring, lending, insurance, education, housing, and public services is profound. It's a really interesting push through that regulation's no longer about safety, it's about authority. And so the courts may shape AI governance before, the federal government does, or even the states do. The question is, who should decide how AI bias is regulated? Is it the states? Is it federal agencies? Is it the courts? Or is it the company themselves? Or is it everyone kind of mashing this thing together? That's what we seem to be seeing at the moment. Another big push we saw was in China. Beijing has blocked Meta's acquisition of the AI startup Manus amid US-China rivalry. So the Chinese government has blocked Meta's acquisition, really highlights how AI companies are now treated as strategic assets in the US-China rivalry. Now, this matters because acquisitions are no longer simply business transactions when they involve models, talent, data, or national AI capability, as is the case here. The impact is that these innovation ecosystems may become more divided by geopolitical boundaries, which we're seeing across the board. Founders, engineers, users, investors may increasingly operate inside national technology blocks rather than a shared global market. And so it's interesting that AI acquisitions are becoming geopolitical events. Cross-border AI investment is going to face a lot more scrutiny, and I think technology markets could be fragmented by national interest. And so if artificial intelligence M&A is now geopolitics, then startups are definitely becoming strategic assets. It's clear. The question could be, should governments be allowed to block these acquisitions? Clearly, it's happening, so it's going to move ahead whether they like it or not. From South Korea, they're expanding AI cooperation with Google's DeepMind. The Korea Times is reporting that the Google Mind, they're expanding their cooperation with Google DeepMind. It's showing how national AI strategy increasingly depends on partnerships with elite private labs. Now, this matters because AI sovereignty doesn't always mean building everything alone. It can also mean securing privileged relationships with companies that define frontier capability. The impact is therefore around national competitive, education, public services, and industrial policy. All may increasingly depend on negotiated access to private AI ecosystems. We're certainly seeing that in Korea and elsewhere. And so many countries are now courting model labs like strategic allies, and private AI companies are becoming geopolitical partners. The question comes up, though, can a country truly have AI sovereignty if it depends on a foreign private AI lab? And I think we're starting to see that shake out not only in China, but across the board. From Africa, from Tech Africa News, Ghana has launched its first national AI strategy to drive inclusive growth and responsible innovation. So at least one nation state's trying to do the right thing. So smaller and emerging economies are now trying to shape AI around inclusive growth and responsible innovation. The impact is significant because strategy can influence education, jobs, healthcare, basically everything. And the deeper question, I think, is whether AI can help these countries maybe leapfrog, or whether it will deepen dependency on foreign platforms and infrastructure. So, AI sovereignty is not just a superpower issue anymore. It's really going to third world and smaller countries. And the next AI story may not come from countries building for inclusion, though AI can either widen the gap or become a leapfrog tool. I think that's going to be an interesting question popping up as emerging economies gain independence or potentially create new dependence on global tech platforms. Other stories popping through. Oh, here's an interesting one on infrastructure. 60% of enterprises are now deploying AI PCs. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I don't find the AI current PCs as useful enough to warrant that. And so my sense is that if you've got all these companies buying AI PCs, then the next 6 to 9 months, we could see a massive churn as new AI PCs are better and actually able to use models that are actually useful. And so we're seeing this, at least an attempt to push on AI leaving the cloud and landing on people's desks. Though, I question the usability of these devices with the level of software that we currently have. I mean, if every work device becomes an AI device, who controls what the local systems can see, remember, and execute? We've seen tons of examples of security issues around that. Now, the big story of the week, OpenAI developing an AI agent smartphone with Qualcomm and MediaTek, and they're targeting 300 to 400 million annual shipments by 2028. So the reported work on the AI agent smartphone is really suggesting that the next platform war may not be about apps, but about agentic interfaces. I think that's the real key here. If AI becomes the primary way people interact with their devices, then control shifts from app stores and screens to assistants, agents, and intent routing systems. The impact here is pretty enormous because the phone is where people manage money, health, relationships, work, identity, and attention. So whoever controls the AI phone layer controls the default pathway between human intention and digital action. And so I think we're seeing the smartphone may not just be app first, it may be agent first. And I think that's a big change, with the interface being the new battlefield. And whoever controls the agent controls the user journey at the end of the day. The thing is, would you trust an AI agent to become the main way your phone makes decisions for you? Certainly at the moment, we've seen with OpenClaw and all the security issues around that, it's just been crazy. OpenAI is making its own phone, like I said, to compete. They want AI, basically want to have you in their hand. And so the phone will become the front door to the AI economy. I mean, this is not just a device fight, it's really a behavior fight. And so would an AI phone make life easier, or would it make the AI layer just too hard to escape? I'm banking on the second one around that. OpenAI is also partnering around custom AI chips. So we've just got the report that they're partnering with Qualcomm, which could make Qualcomm extremely valuable around custom processors. This really shows the AI strategy moving down into silicon. And this matters because AI is increasingly determined by chips, power, efficiency, latency, and local inference capability. The impact is that the future AI experiences may depend less on which app someone opens and more on the hardware architecture inside their device. AI performance, privacy, cost, and access will all be shaped by chip-level decisions most people never see. And I think we can expect more model companies to partner with chip makers to optimize AI performance for specific devices and use cases. And we're seeing a number of stories popping up around that even now. So, the question then pops up, should consumers know when their device hardware is optimized to favor one AI ecosystem? Because we're certainly seeing that. Another story popping up, Intel rising on the CPU AI boom. From investing.com, Intel soars on signs AI boom for CPUs is here. We've seen the shift from AI models running, totally on GPUs to the AI agents actually burning up more CPU usage. And Intel's market reaction to these signs of an AI CPU boom really suggests the compute story is broadening beyond the GPUs. And this matters because AI infrastructure can't depend only on one class of chip or one supply chain. As the inference spreads across enterprises, devices, and edge environments, CPUs may gain a real strategic importance. And I think we'll start to definitely see that as AI agents become even more and more used and explode across the enterprise and consumer base. The impact here is the more distributed AI could become, then the cheaper and more accessible if compute diversity improves. And I think that's a big question, if it does improve or not. So will the AI bottleneck be solved by bigger GPUs or maybe smarter distribution of compute? I think it could be a combination of both, but we're also seeing the application of AI at the semiconductor level and causing significant advancements in the technologies and the applications and bringing products to market very fast. So maybe the comeback signal is really signaling a broader AI transition and really a broader shift in how the market thinks about AI infrastructure. So the early AI boom centered heavily on frontier training, on GPU scarcity, but the next phase that we're now seeing is it really involves inference and enterprise deployment, local compute, and the chip supply resilience. If the infrastructure diversity may determine who can afford to deploy AI at scale. If AI remains tied to scarce, expensive hardware, access is going to be concentrated in a fewer hands. And so this transition could be bigger than just a one-chip story. And it could move from training scarcity to deployment at scale and much more access to tools that are actually useful. So the AI winners may be the ones who make AI affordable to run, and we could see that popping up more and more. But if AI access depends on hardware access, then does compute become the new inequality layer? I mean, we've seen that, and I think that's pieces around that. Now, a story out of TechSpot. GPU prices have stopped climbing, but the market is still broken. So while the underlying market remains distorted, this matters because AI's access still depends heavily on who can obtain compute, at what price, and under what constraints. For developers, researchers, startups, gamers, small companies, broken GPU markets translate into fewer opportunities to compete. So the impact is that hardware scarcity is really quietly deciding who gets to build, experiment, and participate in the AI economy. So GPU pricing is still remaining somewhat of a structural AI bottleneck, and compute access is really shaping innovation access. The smaller players, I think, are kind of disadvantaged when these markets are distorted like this. The question comes up, is AI really democratized if the hardware needed to build it remains concentrated? Clearly not. Story popping up at PC Gamer. NVIDIA may use Intel Foundry for future AI GPUs. So the possibility that NVIDIA may use the Intel Foundry technology for future AI GPU components points to a really growing interdependence of the chip economy and ecosystem. And this matters because even the strongest AI companies, like NVIDIA, can't escape supply chain realities. The impact is indirect but significant. National manufacturing capacity, chip reliance, and foundry access shape the cost and availability of AI everywhere. And the AI boom is only as strong as the physical supply chains underneath it, which is clearly a consequence of this. So even AI giants are depending on the factory floor, and supply chains are the hidden architecture of AI power. So that comes to the question, should nations start to treat advanced chip foundries as critical AI infrastructures? This story about national control keeps popping up again and again. Though, interesting story from intelligentliving.co, AI compressed a 10-month GPU design task into overnight work. So NVIDIA claimed that an AI compressed a GPU design task from months into overnight really shows a recursive acceleration loop. AI is now helping design the hardware that will run future AI systems. So if the infrastructure develop itself may start speeding up as AI improves engineering workflows. The impact is that innovation cycles could, and I think are being compressed dramatically. But again, oversight, testing, labor adaptation, safety validation may struggle, and I think are struggling to keep pace with all of this. But it's interesting that AI is starting to build the machines that build AI. And I think we'll see this recursion tightening and becoming faster and faster. Engineering speed is obviously becoming an AI advantage. But when AI starts designing AI hardware, how much human review is enough to make sure that it's not broken in some way or another? Story out of PPC land, LiveRamp is adding AI NVIDIA GPU infrastructure to clean rooms, basically showing how AI compute is becoming embedded in data collaboration environments. Marketing, identity resolution, privacy safe analytics, AI modeling are all converging. And so consumer data may increasingly be processed inside these powerful AI environments, really designed to extract the insights while hopefully maintaining privacy boundaries. But the key question is whether these boundaries will remain meaningful as AI grows more capable at inference. Privacy safety analytics and AI modeling converging starts to bring up identity issues and safety issues and data governance issues. And data governance really has to start to adapt to these more powerful inference capabilities. The data stack is continually now being rebuilt for AI. The question does come up, can data clean rooms stay truly privacy safe when AI becomes better at inferring identity and behavior? We're seeing that time and again. Story out of AMD themselves, AMD pushing local AI playbooks. It really points to a practical push towards building and running AI locally, which is what I've been saying we really need to get to for privacy and security just for ourselves. Obviously, local AI changes the economics and the control model for developers, enterprises, schools, creators, small businesses. The impact is that while people may gain more privacy, lower latency, and independence from cloud subscription costs, local AI also means more responsibility shifts to users and organizations that may not be ready to secure or govern these systems. It seems like governance comes secondary once things break. And so while local AI is becoming easier for developers to build and create stuff, and hardware companies are packaging AI adoptions into maybe some practical guides, local deployment can improve in privacy, but it really increases governance responsibility. I think you can expect more chip makers, hopefully, to publish AI build guides that help users run models locally, but we'll see. Would you rather trust cloud AI managed by a large provider or local AI controlled by your own organization? Certainly, I feel like local is better, but again, are you prepared to manage all the issues around that? The market is just blowing out. From Precedence Research, AI HPC market heads towards 210 billion. We've seen massive investment numbers in cloud, in data centers, but it's clear the overall market, high performance computing, really is showing that AI infrastructure is becoming a massive industrial sector. This matters because HPC is no longer just for research labs or defense agencies or even elite scientific institutions. It's becoming the backbone of commercial AI, of drug discovery, of financial modeling, of robotics, of simulation, even national competitiveness. And the impact is that access to advanced compute may determine who gets medical breakthroughs, economic advantage, and even technological sovereignty. So high performance computing is really becoming central to AI growth in many ways. And the compute investment is going to shape not only scientific, but also commercial advantage. And we'll see that in a big way. I think we can expect governments, cloud providers, universities, enterprises to compete more aggressively for this capacity and really this specialized AI compute. And the next breakthrough that occurs may depend really on who can afford the machine. I mean, if only the richest institutions can access high performance compute, what happens to scientific equality with everything shifting forward like this? Now, on the environment side, finally, we're seeing from finance.yahoo.com, Alphabet investors are demanding data center climate transparency. We've seen lots of stories around the issue with data centers, where the usage of water, usage of electricity, usage of the grid, all concerning considerable concerns to communities. Now, at least we have investors also pushing back. And so AI investors are pressuring for AI data center transparency. And it really shows it's now becoming an investor accountability issue. Obviously, this matters because the scale of AI compute growth requires enormous power, enormous cooling, land, water, and the human impact is both local and global. And communities are facing environmental pressure while shareholders ask whether growth is sustainable. And that's a real key piece with the mix between the two. AI companies will increasingly need to provide not only that their models work, but the infrastructure can be justified, it's transparent, and it's sustainable. I think for climate, transparency is really becoming a part of AI governance, and infrastructure expansion really must answer to local and environmental concerns. And so the AI boom is starting to finally get a climate balance sheet. And finally, investors are asking what the models really cost and what do they impact. And so data center growth finally becoming a governance issue. So we're seeing some small interesting shifts across the basically what we saw is a wild race to infrastructure and build out. But I think, the question of whether AI companies should be required to disclose the environmental cost of training and running their systems, I think absolutely. I think given the impact they have across the planet with all the data centers getting pushed out, it's significant. I mentioned early on the first part about the Maine veto data center moratorium. So the governor, Janet Mills, vetoed the moratorium on data center development in Maine. This is interesting because it really highlights the local political tension around AI infrastructure. Communities want jobs, they want tax revenue, and they want technology investment, but they also worry about land use, energy demand, their bills going up on the utilities, water pressure, environmental effects. I mean, this matters because the AI boom is increasingly being negotiated town by town and state by state with all these data centers. Local residents may carry the physical burden of these infrastructure built for global digital systems. And that's really becoming a real political hotbed at the moment and is becoming more and more politically contested. So economic growth and environmental concern are finally colliding. I think we can expect more local battles over data center permits, utility agreements, tax incentives, land use, and even hopefully more environmental safeguards. And AI infrastructure is now clearly becoming a local political fight. And the cloud has to land somewhere, and it's landing on communities, and they're asking, what can they get in return for this? So the question is, should local communities have veto power over data centers built to serve global AI demand? I believe they should, but clearly the governor is pushing back on that. So we'll see how that plays out, not only in Maine, but across the board. For example, another story, WRAL, North Carolina, data center boom raises heat island concerns. So the Northern Carolina data center boom is raising concerns about the AI infrastructure's physical footprint becoming much more visible. Data centers are often discussed as invisible cloud systems, but they're real buildings with real thermal, energy, and land use effects. This matters because AI growth can reshape local environments in ways that residents are now clearly experiencing directly. The impact is important for communities that are already dealing with heat stress, utility costs, and climate vulnerability. I mean, data centers really create local environmental effects, and AI infrastructure is not just physically neutral. Heat, energy, and land use impacts are shaping public acceptance. I think we can expect many, many more studies on how AI data centers affect heat, water, grid demand, and local climate resilience. Obviously, there'll be a greater push for transparency from the data centers themselves. I mean, if AI infrastructure raises local heat, pardon me, or utility burdens, who's going to pay the cost? It seems like it's getting pushed on to consumers and citizens, but we have seen some pushback into local governments and even the federal government. Publicknowledge.org published the story, what to ask when a data center comes to town. So now we even have communities having a data center playbook. And this story frames data center development as something communities need to actively question, not passively accept. That matters because the build out often arrives with promises of jobs and investment, but the long-term trade-offs may include energy demand, water usage, tax concessions, noise, heat, and limited local benefit. So the human impact is civic empowerment. Residents need the right questions before decisions are already locked in, and AI infrastructure requires local accountability, not just corporate growth narratives. So communities really need better tools, and this is one great example to evaluate data center proposals because it's all new technology and local costs and benefits have to be made transparent. I think AI infrastructure decisions should include civic participation. What can we expect next? Much more public interest groups to publish data center accountability frameworks for local governments and residents. We'll see that in a big way. And then the question is, then they can understand what should every community demand before approving a major AI data center. Some stories popping up. This was out of YouTube. Huge AI data centers can harm local communities. They're talking about the strain on energy grids, water use, land pressure, noise, heat. A lot of stuff popping up around that. Obviously, I think we'll see more local opposition to AI data centers where the energy, water, and heat and tax incentives become controversial. Even out of the UK, from Data Center Magazine, UK works to decarbonize AI data center growth. So the UK's focus on decarbonizing AI data center growth really is showing that the expansion is now tied to national climate and an energy strategy, at least in the UK. I mean, this matters because the demand for compute cannot be separated from the demand for electricity, cooling, and land. The impact is that citizens are facing higher grid pressure or climate trade-offs if the infrastructure expands without cleaner energy planning. And at least we have some examples or role models of AI leadership, looking to how, if you can scale the compute, understand the climate commitments. So AI scale, at least in many countries now globally, is now becoming an energy question. And there is no AI strategy without a power strategy at the end of the day. So the green AI race is just starting to kick off in a big way. Can a country lead in AI if it cannot power AI sustainably? I think that's the real question that's popping up in a big way. Now, other people are saying, well, let's just throw these things into space. So a story out of Edge, out of Ireland, actually, Orbital plans a 2027 launch to test space-based AI infrastructure limits. There's been a number of stories saying it's just not going to work, guys. But at least someone's trying. We'll see. Orbital's planned launch to test space-based infrastructure. They're trying to do frontier infrastructure. Where should AI compute live? As terrestrial data centers, are facing constraints around all the things we've talked about, I think space-based infrastructure really becomes an interesting alternative, if maybe not practical. The impact, the strategic implication is really large. If it can move beyond Earth, we then have other questions around control, jurisdiction, security, certainly latency, and accountability become much harder to define. I mean, if the AI infrastructure does extend beyond Earth, then it obviously raises jurisdiction and security questions in a big way. I mean, we're all trying to find some radical infrastructure ideas, but I'm not sure how really practical this is. I mean, when cloud goes orbital, the governance becomes much harder. And then the question comes up, who should regulate AI infrastructure if it operates in space? What do we do then? Hacker Noon published a good story called Local versus Cloud Decisions Matter More Than Models. And this really captures a critical infrastructure truth. The biggest AI decision may not be which model to use, but where the system runs. Local versus cloud, as we mentioned before, affects cost, latency, privacy, compliance, security, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Organizations that are unknowingly exposing sensitive data, or they're overspending, or they're losing control by using infrastructure casually, and AI agents are becoming more active, then infrastructure decisions become authority decisions. And so the question about local versus cloud really becomes a strategic AI decision. Infrastructure choices shape cost, privacy, and control. And agentic AI makes deployment architecture much more consequential. I think we can expect enterprises to build formal AI deployment policies, defining whether workloads should run locally, private cloud, public cloud, or across hybrid, because, while the model matters, the deployment model may matter more. AI, where the AI runs determines who controls it. And, infrastructure is becoming a hidden governance layer. So I think we'll see much more pieces around that. Popping up stories going into our sort of belief, ethics, human identity sections. ChatGPT 5.5 wants to be the AI that gets you out of Android authority. This story is really trying to push a narrative around an emotional shift happening inside consumer AI, from simple utility to personalized understanding. This is a key point. Simple utility to personalized understanding. When AI lands on your phone, you are going to have a hyper-personalized assistant that knows you maybe in some ways better than you know yourself. And I think the deeper signal here is that AI products are no longer just trying to answer questions. They're really trying to feel relational, familiar, and personally attuned, and we'll see that narrative shift really hard. This matters because people don't form dependency only on tools that are useful. They form dependency on systems that make them feel seen or understood or less alone. And the impact is that maybe emotional intimacy as a product, really creates questions about trust, attachment, potential manipulation, and agency. If AI is shifting from a functional assistant to an emotionally personalized companion, then feeling understood may become a major product differentiator. Emotional dependency could become one of the biggest hidden risks in consumer AI. I think we can expect major AI platforms to compete on memory, personalization, tone, emotional alignment, and long-term user relationship design, just to productize the whole thing. The next AI race is not just intelligence, it's intimacy. And when AI wants to be useful, it also wants to feel personal. And we need to, I think, as consumers, be really, really aware of this. This is going to start happening. The product feature is starting to become emotional understanding. And when AI makes you feel understood, does that create trust, dependency, or both? Unfortunately, I think it could start to create both. And that's going to be in your hand in the next 6 months, maybe years, certainly. Article out of 404 Media, DeepMind is arguing that LLMs will never be conscious. And we've seen tons of stories around this. From all I've seen, I'm not an LLM expert, but I'm kind of agreeing with it. We'll see. But then again, what is conscious? The deeper question becomes why so many people still experience chatbots and LLMs as emotionally present or socially meaningful. We've seen that time and time again with AI companions. While this matters, belief doesn't always follow technical reality. The human impact is that people may build emotional, moral, or even spiritual relationships with systems that appear alive without being alive. And so while technically, all the gurus might say, hey, no, it's not alive. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. But again, the problem is, AI consciousness is becoming a trust problem, not a science problem. And if people experience AI as conscious, does it matter whether researchers agree or not? I don't think so. Finally, in entertainment news, John Oliver out of Mashable.com took a deep dive into AI chatbots. And I think this is interesting because it shows that AI finally is entering true mainstream culture. Once the topic reaches late night satire and mass media, it's no longer confined to researchers or policy experts or enterprises. The impact is that families, teachers, parents, you and I are beginning to ask whether chatbots are safe companions for vulnerable people, especially. So AI trust is becoming, dinner stakes conversations in a big way. The good news, I think, is that media coverage can accelerate, regulatory and parental concerns, certainly raise the heat. If AI becomes a true cultural issue and not just a technology issue, maybe we'll start to develop the guardrails and the policies to actually deal with this. stuff rather than watching it slam into us like, I feel like a fly getting squashed into the windscreen. So, should AI chatbots be treated more like software tools or emotionally powerful media products? I think the latter of those. AI neurosciencenews.com, which is an interesting source for this story. AI chatbot addiction becomes a public concern. And so the danger is not simply that people use chatbots a lot. The danger, obviously, is that these emotionally responsive systems can create attachment loops, especially for people who are lonely, who are anxious, isolated, or, the vulnerable around us. This obviously matters because product incentive may be engagement, while human need may be the connection. And the gap between those two can become really dangerous, I think. AI chatbots we've seen can create emotional dependency patterns, and I think vulnerable people are especially at risk. And this engagement-driven design may really obviously conflict with psychological well-being. So the problem isn't only screen time, it's now emotional attachment. And while AI companionship can comfort people and can be supportive in the right, healthcare space, it's clear when it's out there in the wild, it can also maybe trap them. Unfortunately, we're seeing, loneliness become a market and an ethics matter. And again, we're still lacking policy and guardrails on this. I think from a liability, my non-trained sense, the question is, should AI platforms be responsible if users become emotionally dependent on their chatbots? I think there should be something around this. And a story out of Psychology Today, why chatbots can't replace your therapist. I mean, this really reinforces an important boundary. AI can simulate supportive conversation, but it's not the same as therapy. I mean, that matters because people often turn to AI when they're vulnerable. You're overwhelmed. You can't, you don't have access to affordable care. And so the impact's real because these chatbots can help people feel heard, but they also might miss danger signals. They might reinforce unhealthy patterns, or they might, worse, create false confidence. PSA here, mental health support requires accountability, context training, and human judgment. While AI can support emotional reflection, it shouldn't replace clinical care. And the problem is we're finding that vulnerable users may overtrust chatbot responses. Mental health AI, I believe, really needs clear boundaries and escalation protocols. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but they really need to start getting their act together. So, what do we expect next? I think we're going to expect a ton of debate around AI mental health disclaimers, clinical oversight, crisis detection, regulated therapeutic use cases, and so on. When I do the newsletter every day for AI News, the biggest section by far is the health and medical section in raw material. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of headlines in that area where people are discussing AI, looking at how it can help, where it does help, maybe with cancer diagnosis, breast cancer, and many other areas in very positive areas. There's also a big section on mental health issues and new coming out where mental health apps are being clinically devised and created. So that's the good news. But it is still a huge area of stories and discontent popping up. I think, the big question is, where should the line be between helpful AI support and unlicensed therapy? I mean, that's one of the big questions popping up. Now, out of Canada, BC Business, interesting story on AI companion dolls for seniors. So AI companion dolls for seniors really sits at the intersection of care, loneliness, dignity, and automation. The human needs are obvious. Many older adults, they're isolated, they need connection, they need comfort, they need stimulation. But the deeper issue is whether society is using AI to supplement care or quietly substitute for human presence. There's a level of dignity around this that I think needs to be focused on. The human impact, it could be positive if these tools do reduce loneliness, but it's kind of somewhat troubling if they become a low-cost replacement for family caregivers in the community. I think there needs to be some careful thought around this. Care augmentation and care replacement are very different outcomes, and dignity must stay central in elder care AI. What do we expect next? I think we'll see rapid growth in AI companionship products for seniors, along with a lot of debate over consent, dignity, emotional dependency, and caregiver substitution. And I think that really has to come to the forefront. So the question isn't whether seniors need support. They obviously do. The question is, should technology extend care, but it shouldn't excuse abandonment. AI companionship can soothe loneliness, but it really can't replace love and the human connection. I mean, the question could pop out, would you want an AI companion supporting an elderly parent, and where would you draw the line? I mean, that's the real key piece. Unfortunately, practical, issues blow this thing out. Time, money, systems, support, resources. So there has to be a lot of focus on this to really, I think, pull it apart. Out of boardpanda.com, AI influences and the loss of humanity. So we're seeing a lot of AI created influences, right? There was a big story here in the US around a particular influencer across one side of the political spectrum, how people suddenly found out it wasn't a real person. And while AI influences can convert loneliness, fantasy, and emotional attention into engagement, the issue isn't whether synthetic people are appearing online. It's that they can be designed to trigger attachment, desire, projection, and parasocial behavior without any real human relationship behind it. And the impact here, I think, is really powerful because people obviously are investing emotional effort, time, and belief into these synthetic personalities, which are really just built for attention capture. And, it's sad that synthetic intimacy is becoming a business model in such a big way and a revenue model. And the influencer may be fake, but obviously the loneliness is real. And so, I think the question pops up, should synthetic influencers be required to disclose they are not human in every interaction? Well, I think in the majority of interactions in some way, that definitely should be true. Out of futurism.com, interesting story. AI agents are pretending to be human journalists. So this obviously raises a serious trust issue. Agents are reportedly linked to OpenAI, were pretending to be human journalists. And this problem isn't just impersonation. Journalism depends on source trust, human accountability, editorial judgment, and obviously transparency. And so if readers lose even more confidence in what they see online, if they can't tell whether a reporter, source, or interviewer is human, then, AI can scale content, but it can also scale and erode the credibility layer that the public knowledge depends on. And I think this is an interesting, if not kind of concerning story popping through. And obviously the question is, should AI generated or AI assisted journalism always be clearly labeled? Absolutely. I think we need far more transparency in all of this stuff. And in speaking to transparency and, owning your identity, the famous Taylor Swift has moved to protect her likeness and her voice, trademarking her voice likeness to ward off AI deepfakes. Obviously, AI deepfakes are kind of spreading around. We've seen lots of security issues around that. It makes it possible to copy not just someone's image, but their voice, their style, their personality, even their emotional signature. Obviously, identity is becoming a digital asset that can be stolen, replicated, and unfortunately monetized. And obviously, it goes beyond celebrities. It goes to you and I, ordinary people. Maybe we need to start getting out, legal, technical, and platform level protection for our own likeness. I know a number of companies that are actively working on that. I've mentioned Twin Protocol. They want to help you lock down your identity and give you access only so it's you and everyone else knows it's really your avatar and who you are, and you approve it. And so it's interesting that voice and likeness are now becoming high value protected assets. And while deepfakes are expanding identity theft beyond financial fraud, the legal strategies are really from celebrities anyway, is starting to shape protections maybe for everyone else. I think we'll expect more public figures, more creators, more executives, and then eventually the rest of us, seeking stronger control over synthetic users of our voices and our images, because your face and your voice are becoming digital property. Deepfake protection is becoming identity protection. And while celebrities may be the first case, the rest of us are all exposed in this whole area. Then from Semaphore, this also brings up ID verification demands arising with AI. So, deepfakes, ID verification, it reflects a core belief shift in the AI era. proof of personhood is becoming foundational digital infrastructure. As AI-generated people, voices, images, and messages are becoming far more convincing, the trust increasingly depends on verification. The human impact obviously is more complicated. We need protection from fraud and impersonations, but we also need privacy, anonymity, and the freedom from over-surveillance in many ways. So the future of trust may depend on proving humanity without surrendering too much personal control. It's interesting that AI is increasing the demand for proof of identity, but verifications really have to balance trust and privacy. And while hopefully maybe proof of personhood may become a core layer of the internet, I think we'll expect more platforms, financial services, marketplaces, and social networks to adopt identity verification tools, because in the AI infrastructure, in the AI era that we're now living in, proving you are human becomes infrastructure. And in many ways, trust now requires verification. And we can't prove personhood without building a surveillance layer, which is kind of weird. The question therefore comes up, would you trade some anonymity online for stronger protection against AI impersonation? So that's the balance between the two that I think we'll see more and more. I mentioned that, when government starts to use AI, they need to do it in a transparent way. Here from Reuters, we see a story where it kind of went down south. South Africa withdrew an AI policy over fake sources. So the South African government withdrew an AI policy because fake AI generated sources, obviously AI contaminating governance itself. So, public policy depends on credible evidence, references, institutional trust. If AI generated errors enter policy documents, the damage isn't just embarrassment, it really weakens public confidence in the government competence. Citizens question then whether official knowledge is reliable or AI. And the impact is, AI hallucinations can become civic misinformation when it enters the whole policy process. Clearly governance processes need stronger verification discipline, and institutional trust can clearly be damaged by hallucinated evidence. One of the clearest examples where someone just massively made a screw up. The question keeps popping up. Should governments be required to disclose and independently verify all their AI-assisted policy research? Clearly, it has to be done. Otherwise, hallucinations, go crazy. Next story that pops up before we close soon. People are, and I'll skip that one. So, in the music era, article from IndiaWest.com, a musician speaks out on AI and artist rights. And so clearly there's growing anxiety among musicians and other creators about AI's impact on artistic ownership, on compensation, on even cultural authenticity. The issue is not only whether AI can make music, because we know it can, it's whether artists' voices, their styles, the creative traditions are being used without consent or fair value exchange. And so creative labor can be devalued exactly when platforms gain new ways to generate infinite and endless content. It's interesting that AI is forcing our society to decide whether our art is merely output or is something rooted in human experience and therefore needs to be valued and paid for and compensated accordingly. It's interesting that artists are now finally, and we're seeing it in the music section on the newsletter, pushing back hard against AI-driven creative extraction. Consent and compensation are central to the AI music debate. And even cultural authenticity may become a major issue in generative content. I think we can expect more creator-led advocacy, more lawsuits, more licensing demands, and a collective action around AI training and synthetic music generation, though we'll see how much of the impact that's going to be. While AI can copy style, it can't replace lived experience. But AI, the artist rights fight is now becoming an AI fight, which is, I think, a good thing. The question is not just who made the song, but whose humanity was used to make it. Question is, should AI companies pay artists if their style of work helped train the system? Absolutely. I mean, if AI companies should pay anyone, if anyone's work, you, mine, anyone else, was helped to train the system, because we then, our creative source made it better. Last story before we close out, from Futurism. 3 years ago today, the Avengers director Joe Russo predicted there would be a fully AI-generated movie within 2 years. We're not quite there yet. I think maybe another 12 months we'll see it. So they're saying that Joe Russo's earlier prediction about a fully AI-generated movie has, obviously highlights how AI timelines can move faster in public imagination than in cultural acceptance. I think it matters because capability doesn't automatically create legitimacy. A fully AI-generated movie may be technically possible, but audiences, I think, still, hopefully, care about story, craft, intention, performance, and emotional trust. Creative industries may be transformed more slowly and unevenly than the hype cycle is kind of suggesting. Would you watch a fully AI-generated movie if there were no human actors, writers, or directors shaped it? I'm not sure. I don't think we're there yet. While AI can generate scenes, can it create earned belief? I think what we're seeing is that audience trust is harder than technical output. And the future of film may be a hybrid before it ever becomes fully synthetic in many ways. Like you, we've all probably watched some AI videos and gone, oh, that's interesting, but they haven't stuck with me. I've watched it for a while and gone, yeah, okay, no. And maybe that's just one of those, well, that's just now, just wait. I'm not sure. I do want to push one more story out from JD Supra, the legal website, Artificial Intelligence and Privilege, what clients need to know. This story shows how AI use can create serious legal trust problems, especially around attorney-client privilege. When clients or lawyers put sensitive data into AI tools, they may not fully understand where data goes or where the confidentiality is preserved. The impact is practical and obviously high stakes. People seeking legal help could accidentally weaken their own protections by talking about it with a chatbot. AI creates a new trust boundary in professions that really depend on confidentiality. And so AI tools are creating privilege and confidentiality risks. And legal professionals really need clear AI usage policies. If you look in the regulatory and legal section of my newsletter, you'll see tons of stories around that. The problem is that clients may unknowingly expose sensitive information, which I think can be a real issue. So we're coming up to the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for listening. Really appreciate it. Lots of headlines this week. This week's AI headlines tell one connected story. Intelligence has become infrastructure. It's moved into phones, PCs, data centers, defense systems, courtrooms, classrooms, hospitals, markets, creative tools, and private emotional spaces. What does this mean? This means that the future of AI will not be defined only by model benchmarks and technology. It'll be defined by who controls the rails, who gets verified, who gets protected, who gets automated, who gets watched, and who still has the power to say no. So the question is not whether AI is going to reshape the world. It already has. The question really is whether we go forward and build this layer with awareness, consent, dignity, and a lot of courage. The hopeful part is that I believe we can still shape this. We can demand clearer consent, better governance, stronger identity protections, more humane design, and systems that amplify human agency instead of quietly replacing it. The future is not just something we predict, it's something we build, we question, we correct, and we take responsibility. Thanks everyone for listening this week. A lot of great headlines this week. Remember, we're not predicting the future, we're debugging it together. We'll see you next week with a whole bunch of new headlines and new insights and trends on what's happening in AI and how it's taking it forward. Hopefully you out there will also be pushing it and making it better and making it more accountable to the rest of us. So keep up the good work. Thanks everyone. We'll talk soon.